All right, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I just wanted to analyze a couple of points that I've noted down just to go ahead and prove that we do live in a satanic culture which is twisted, which is warped beyond belief, and where everything good has been turned upside down on its head and everything bad has been brought to the forefront. Just some points of how we have strayed from the way the ancients thought on a lot of things and destroyed ourselves as a result. And all of these points are indicative of our culture and the way we think as at least in the modern world in the 21st century, if we even accept modern history, the chronology we're given. But nonetheless, today we think in these terms, and it's destroying us. It's turning us inside out. So one of the aspects, one of the first point I'm going to go on is in our culture, there's the exaltation of youth, whereas in many ancient cultures, there was the exaltation of elderliness, being a senior. So if you can think about it, with youth comes immaturity. It's a lot of energy, but lack of wisdom and lack of experience. Whereas with being elderly, it's the opposite. It's maybe less energy, reduced, but more experience and more wisdom, less sort of rash action and more contemplating, more consideration of what you're about to do and the quality of your actions, whereas youth is the reverse. In some way, you can think of it as the youth, let's say 20s and 30s and teens. This is the era in your life of the flesh, whereas growing older, and hopefully as we grow older, we get more mature by God's leave. Elderliness is like the age of the spirit in some way. It's filled with more wisdom and less rash action. And in our culture, it's the exaltation of the youth. If you look at these celebrities, it seems like they're starting to get younger and younger and younger. By the time they're like 25, they're about too old. Usually, in most cases, they need to be phased out, and now we need to bring in a new face that's more attractive, that's more enjoyable. That it seems to be getting younger and younger, 17, 16, 18, 19. And if you look at female celebrities, male celebrities, they continually get hair transplants and face treatments, and they dye their hair. Their beard is starting to turn white and gray, and they do all these things to try to stay young. I mean, look at these women like Madonna and Nicki Minaj, and I actually don't even type them up because it's an insult and indignation to even look at them because they're so immodestly dressed. But we all know how they are. It's this chasing after youth, the exaltation of youth, the fire of youth. It's really the exaltation of the age in your life of the flesh. Whereas in the past, if you notice, look at the way these ancient cultures, Christian cultures, whatever, even Hadithan cultures, the way they would draw the prophets and the saints. These were the people that were the heroes back in the day, right? If you look at them, they were elderly. They had long beards, white beards. They looked seasoned and aged with wisdom. They didn't look like young men full of haughtiness, but rather they looked like men that had seen quite a bit in life, and they're kind of reaching the end. And these heroes of theirs, the saints and the prophets, they were drawn in that light, and it says something about how they exalted at elderliness. And we shouldn't exalt at it, but rather they upheld elderliness as a beautiful thing and growing old gracefully, because they drew their heroes as elderly men. And of course, because the prophets, they were exemplary in terms of wisdom, in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience. And that's really one of the differences between our culture and a lot of cultures in the ancient world. Is now it's the exaltation of youth in both men and women, whereas in the past, and a lot of times, it was the exaltation of the elderly, the one who has gained experience through lots of things in life. Second point is in our culture, it's there's the exaltation of freedom, versus in the ancient world, in many other places, there was the exaltation of authority, boundaries, and station. So if you look at us, we're all about our freedom, my rights. We think so much about what society owes us, my rights, I'm owed this, I'm owed that, but rarely do we ever think about what we owe society, what we owe the Lord, what we owe to creation. It's always about me, and my freedom. And this goes across the board. It's not just a so-called neocon conservative type of guy. Really not true conservative, it's neocon. and liberal. It goes to liberals as well. It's with the neocon, it's my freedom, my right, it's my property. I can do whatever I want with it. I can charge interest with it. I can scam you so long as it's consensual. The NAP, bro, the NAP, the non-aggression principle. So long as I'm not beating you up with my fists, then it's okay, as long as we everything we do is consensual, including illicit sexual relations outside of marriage, including prostitution, including charging interest. All these things are okay if they're done consensually. And it goes to the liberal as well. My freedom. My freedom, even though I'm a man and God created me as a man, I'm going to act like a woman and pretend like I'm a woman. It's my right. It's my right to live in delusion and to believe abject nonsense. Even with the women too, it's like it's my right to be this independent boss woman and not contribute to my community by marrying a good man and building this unit. No, I'm going to do my own thing and live this selfish life. All these people, they're all about freedoms and rights. It's my right to live in delusion. It's my right to scam. It's my right to engage in sin. And no, it's not your right. Not at all. So it's all about freedom here, whereas in the past it was the exaltation of authority, boundaries, and station. If you look at ancient Indian culture, across the board it was, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with how it was set up with the caste system, but the caste system, it did promote some kind of a societal order. It wasn't freedom. I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kashtri, I'm a Dalit, whatever at the bottom. My caste determined my role in life, and there wasn't all this freedom to choose and be who you want to be, make your own destiny, make your own vision, make your own future. This kind of self worship, it wasn't there, and really the ultimate form of authority. Lesser forms of authority are like parents, grandparents, and in the West there's no respect for parents or grandparents or anything like that across the board. But the ultimate authority is God. When people, they think that this kind of freedomist mentality has led them to believe that their emotions are the most important thing in the world. If I like something, therefore I should be able to do it. There's no concept of authority. Or if I don't like it, therefore it can't be right. Even if God revealed something in his holy scriptures that you don't necessarily like, that may go against your emotions, that may go against your vain desires, they don't accept the authority of the Lord and lower their head. Remember, it's all about freedom. It's all about liberation. It's not about authority and boundary and stations. They don't understand the authority of the Lord. When you tell them God has revealed such and such, so quit doing your behavior, people react to that in a hostile and visceral manner. And that's the freedom culture that we have. It's not lowering your head before authority, showing respect and honor to your parents, even if they failed in a lot of ways. A lot of our parents have failed, but just it doesn't mean you have to agree with them. If they tell you to do falsehood, don't do it. But speak with kindness, speak with respect, give them the dignity that they deserve, which God has commanded you. We don't understand these kinds of boundaries at all, the difference between men and women. It's all freedom. I can do what I want when I want. I am not beholden to any principles and expectations outside of me. So that's another difference. The exaltation of freedom, which is really just your so-called freedom, is just you being a slave to your own sin and your vain desire, versus the exaltation of boundaries, station, and place in life. And this freedom has, it's led to chaos. Nobody knows their role in anything. They don't know their role before their Lord. They don't know their role before their parents. They don't know their role before their brothers or sisters. It's the involution of all hierarchy in every sense, and it's just led to confusion in our society. Third point will be, in our culture, they have the exaltation of pleasure and self-indulgence. So the meaning of life is happiness and amusement, whereas in the ancient world, many more older cultures, it was the exaltation of self-restraint. So the exaltation of pleasure. It's all about me. And this goes back to the freedom thing. It's all about my fun. It's all about enjoyment. I'm going to travel all over the world, and I'm going to sleep with as many women as possible. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to live for myself. They'll say the meaning of life is happiness. So what do whatever makes you happy. Do whatever makes you happy. Well, no, don't do whatever makes you happy. Do what you need to. Do what is your divine duty, what you've been called to do by your Lord. It's even you look at these rappers, the way they live their life, it's just the most selfish, laziest, godless life possible. Just sleeping with all these women with no care of what consequences that's going to bring in their life now and in the future when they try to marry another man. No care for spreading righteousness, spreading truth. No care for charity in the true sense of the word, not their virtue signaling. They pretend to donate to this and that, uh, fund or organization. That this is all their philanthropy is just a joke, but it's all about me and my life. My life is about my happiness, my pleasure, and not about fulfilling my station in life. Whereas in the ancient world, there was an exaltation, and this is especially strong in Christian culture, but also in Hadithan culture and Jewish culture, the exaltation of self restraint, holding oneself back. That just because I feel like doing something, it doesn't mean that I should. It needs to first coincide with the law of God. It needs to coincide with the destiny that has been set out for me by the Lord. The exaltation of holding oneself back. I think even Thomas Aquinas has said that, and it's a great definition, that the definition of femininity or being feminine, effeminate as a man, is not being able to put aside one's desires and pleasures for what one needs to do. And that is an extremely appetite description, because self-restraint, this is international, even in Hindu culture, in ancient Babylonian culture, the looking up to, and the whole, and now he's seen as lame, such a man, but the exalting of the man who is able to hold himself back from his desires, consider his actions with care, and do what needs to be done, do what, and not in the Toyota Corolla C19 nonsense way that they manipulate the word, but do what's literally best for society, what's best for the world, what's most righteous and honorable and fitting of a man. We have lost that completely. It's all about myself and my pleasure. So that's the third point. Fourth point is, now we have the exaltation of popularity and mass appeal with things like democracy and social media influencers. And in the past, there was an exaltation of the private man who finds solitude in God, the devout family man, the monk, etc. So you see, for us nowadays, it's all about popularity. And it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter the quality of action. It doesn't matter how obscene and outrageous the things you are doing are. It's just about popularity. Who can get the most clicks? And that involves women at the youngest of ages, 16, 17, 18, 15, taking off more and more clothes on TikTok and Instagram just to get their followers. Men posting these comedy reels, just inappropriate comedy reels, the most lewd and godless humor possible. But if it gets clicks, if it makes me popular, then it's better. Democracy. If an idea is popular, if most people believe in it and want it, therefore it should be passed. The will of the people, the will of the base, crude, and coarse masses. Social media influencers. It's all about popularity. Again, not about quality of action, but about how many people come to view those actions. Whereas in the ancient world, there was the exaltation of the private man. You can think of people would uphold in a. I'm not saying everybody lived like this, but at least in the culture, there was an appreciation for the monk, family man, the person who was married, maybe had kids, maybe he didn't, but the person who lived a life in solitude with his close circle, just with his wife, maybe his kids, maybe the monk who was just going solo, and he found solitude in the Lord alone, quietness, meekness, humbleness, not this flagrant boasting and showing off of everything I had in this mass appeal. There was in every ancient culture, Hindu culture, the Hindu monk, the Christian monk, the Islamic monk, Hadithan monk, whatever you want to call them, there was the upholding of the private man, and we have lost that nowadays with the worship of popularity and mass appeal, really appealing to the lowest aspects of man. And that's how these people get popular nowadays, these Instagram influencers and whatnot. They get popular by appealing to our sin, our vain desire, and the most lowest, crudest aspects of ourselves. So you see these women on Instagram, and I don't use Instagram or anything like that, but or these women on TikTok, they get popular by appealing to men's base desires, the sexual gratification. They take off more and more clothes, and men want to watch them. You see these men, they get popular, these red pill guys, by appealing to men's insecurities, their insecurities regarding their finances, their insecurities regarding women. Oh, I'm going to show you how to get six-pack abs. I'm going to show you how to get $1 million, how to make $100,000 next year, and all this stuff. It's in order to get popular, you have to appeal to the lowest levels in people, the common denominator, the shaitanic provocations in all people, in order to see yourself grow in that kind of way. So that's the fourth point. Fifth point is, in our culture, we have the exaltation of self-love and self-acceptance, whereas in ancient world, many cultures of yore, of past, was the exaltation of self-denial and self-purification. So you see these people, it doesn't matter what delusion it is. I'm a man who thinks he's a woman now. I think I'm a war helicopter. Racial fluidity. I'm a brown man, but now I'm going to identify as a black man or a white man. Just whatever nonsense that people can come up with. It's all about self-acceptance and self-love. You hear this everywhere, and it makes me cringe. I need to love myself. I need to love myself. I have to accept. I came to accept my gay identity or whatever. I came to accept my, what do they call this? I don't even know what it is, sexual orientation. I came to accept it. It's all about acknowledging and raising up and giving credence to one's own vain desire. Whereas in the ancient world, there was the exaltation of self-denial and self-purification, understanding that not every thought that goes through my head, every feeling that I have is valid. Many, in fact, the vast majority, most of my feelings should be ignored. And I should focus on the scriptures, what the word of God says, that which is objective, and use that as a framework and reference point to organize my life, not my own thoughts and my own feelings. There wasn't this self-acceptance, but actually this self-denial that the heart provokes to evil, that the shaitan provokes to evil within us, and we need to ignore these provocations. So that's another big difference. Fourth point, or fifth point, I lost count. Let's see, what point am I at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that was the fifth point. Now the sixth point is the exaltation of convenience and quick fixes versus the exaltation of quality and mastering one's craft. You see it everywhere, all over YouTube, these so-called master classes, master playing. I don't know, there's a harmonica in front of me. I don't even know why I have that. It's just, been in my room for years. I just found it a couple days ago. Mastering the harmonica in 10 days, or learning Arabic in 7 days, or play like Beethoven in a month. Just this quick convenience thing. Quick recipe for eggs Benedict or whatever. It's all this quick stuff, quick foods, quick relations, how to get a girlfriend fast, how to get a girl really quickly. It's all this exaltation of convenience and quickness. Whereas in the past, there was the exaltation of quality and mastering one's craft. Even if it was the most simple thing, the most seemingly unimportant thing. Let's say a guy who was a leather worker, a shoemaker, and he practiced his craft for 30 years. He's been making shoes. He's been working the leather, which was passed down to him by his father, which was passed down to him by the father before him. This was a generation upon generation of accumulating knowledge in this craft. There was more of that, a quality over quantity. And you can even read Rene Guénon and go over that. Now we have entered into the reign of quantity, the world of quantity, of convenience, of quickness, of mass appeal. And mass appeal not just in terms of culture, but mass appeal in terms of even accessibility before things. Something is not good if it's hard to learn. Something is not good if it takes time. It needs to be quick and easy. And that definitely sets us apart from how the ancients used to think. Another one, point number 6, is perhaps point number 6. 1, 2, I don't know why I keep losing count. 3, 4, 5, 6. Point number 7, and this is probably the biggest one, is the exaltation of this life versus the exaltation of the hereafter. In our culture, there is an exaltation of the life of this world. YOLO, bro. You only live once. Have fun. Live wild. Go crazy. Live with no regrets. Do whatever you want to do. Basically, drink the nectar out of this life and all that it can give you in terms of pleasure and carnal satisfaction, because there is no life in the hereafter. It's just YOLO. You only live once. We're alive now, then we die, and we go to sleep forever. Whereas in every ancient culture, any society that is going to last for a while has to believe in the hereafter. They have to have a strong faith in the hereafter. Now we have a society which doesn't believe in the hereafter, and it's destroying. We're falling apart very quickly as a result of it. In the past, there was the exaltation of the hereafter, the turning away from sin, turning away again from the vain desire, from the carnal pleasure, and focusing on what's better, focusing on that which is coming afterwards, which is eternal and everlasting and brings us true peace. It's the it's precisely the opposite of you only live once. It's not YOLO, it's you really live in the hereafter. That was the message of all the ancients. And even if it expressed itself in the false belief in reincarnation, whatever it was looking towards something better and the denying of oneself at this present hour in order to be in a better state in the hereafter. This is ubiquitous across the board. All ancient cultures accepted this kind of a belief, this kind of a destiny for humanity, that there was something greater on the other side. And now we've lost that. It's just the exalting of this life. Who can show off the most wealth, who can be the biggest, who can sleep with the most women, who can enjoy the delusion that is the life of this world in the most flagrant and offensive way possible. Point number 7 is the exaltation of uniqueness. Now we got to be unique, versus in the past it was the exaltation of conforming to a tradition and what has already worked. Now, I'm not saying you should follow tradition when it's wrong. Of course, we have the example of Abraham. He didn't follow the tradition of his forefathers, but in fact, really, he followed the true tradition that goes back to Adam. But nonetheless, it was the reason he rejected following what his father Azar told him to worship these idols was he wasn't trying to be unique. It wasn't this selfish self-worship thing of, oh, I'm going to try to be unique. It was him just following what was right, what was true. And if my forefathers followed what was true, then I'm going to follow what is true. And if my forefathers followed falseness, I'm going to ignore that and follow. It's about following what's true. Uniqueness was not the prime factor or the prime reason why Abraham rejected the religion of his forefathers and went to worship God alone. Now it's all about uniqueness. Look at these people. The delusion and the self-identities that they give themselves. And, even if you look at the LTBG stuff, they keep, I don't even know what it is now. They keep adding more and more acronyms. They keep adding more and more colors and bands to their flag. More unique delusional identities people give to themselves. And this worshiping of uniqueness is really a worship of the self and the ego and selfishness. I don't care about being unique. I don't believe I'm unique. I'm trying to follow the tradition of men who have followed their Lord. I'm trying to follow that which has worked in the past. I am actually totally ununique. I'm following after the Millat Ibrahim, the way of Abraham, who inclined to truth, and he was not of the idolaters. I'm trying to follow the way of Adam, the way of Abraham, the way of Isaac, the way of Jacob. Abraham is our spiritual father, and that's what I have myself aligned to in my life. I don't care if all the people around me follow it or not. I just need to follow what is truthful. Uniqueness is not a factor which I consider. And really, this whole thing of looking to uniqueness as the greatest thing is it's a form of tyranny as well. It's reducing people's thinking into the most selfish way possible. So there's no possibility for community, no possibility for growth. There's nothing between you and the state. There's no institution, because you've destroyed every relationship in your life because you're this unique person. You're this special person, I'm a woman and I don't need to conform to what my husband tells me, provided it's within reason, of course, but I don't need to answer to another man. I don't need to serve another man, cook and clean to him, because I'm a unique case. I'm not like those people of the past. Or with the men, I don't need to follow the Lord. I don't need to follow the scripture because I'm unique. I think I'm smarter than them. I'm going to make my own worldview up. I'm going to figure things out for myself. All this uniqueness, it's really a tyranny to destroy every semblance, every possibility of community, and make you this selfish ingrate. So there's nothing between you and the government. There's no institution other than you and the government, and you're just this atomized drone. When Abraham in the Quran, when the sons of Abraham, they say, "Oh, I'm going to follow Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, my fathers." They're what they're saying is, I'm going to follow that which has worked. They're conforming themselves to the true tradition, which goes back to the beginning, which is worshiping God alone and doing good deeds. So, and again, I don't see this anywhere in the Quran, the exalting of being unique. The only uniqueness we have is being unique and exemplary insofar as how righteous you are and how many good deeds you do in the cause of God, but not making up your own ideology and your own delusion. Point number 8 is now we have the exaltation of tolerance, versus in the past it was the exaltation of discrimination and judgment. So here it's tolerance of everything, no standard, no boundaries. Whatever people come up with, whatever sin they bring to the forefront, whatever evil way in which they live their life, I need to accept it as valid. It's built upon this relativistic scheme too. There's no truth. There's no really valid way to live life. There's no meaning to life. We just gotta kind of got to find our own way, find our own meaning. I need to tolerate everything, whether it's a man doing completely inappropriate and humiliating things with another man or with another woman. It could be somebody coming to me with their delusional self-identity. I need to tolerate it. I need to accept it and give it credence. Whereas in the past, everyone's heard this quote before, that a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. A man who has no boundaries will fall for anything. And in the ancients, they understood this. They had a concept of, actually it was seen as good, whereas now it's seen as an insult, of being discriminatory, judgmental. Oh, that man was a discriminatory man. That basically means that that individual, he was able to look and see what is right and what is wrong. He was actually able to make a decision. That's all discrimination and being judgmental is. When people say, oh, Waleed, you're discriminatory, you're judgmental. And our judgments should be based on facts, not based on rumors. But so long as they're based on facts, provable things that people have done, if a guy can't control himself, he just keeps sleeping around with all these girls, I can make a judgment about him that you are a sinful degenerate and you have no control or respect for yourself or for other people. You're selfish. And this thing was understood in the past as a good quality for a man to have, being judgmental, being able to actually make a decision on something and operate on that basis, a decision on something or someone. But now it's all about tolerance and lack of boundaries. And this goes back to what I said before about the exaltation of freedom. And in the past, there was the exaltation of boundaries, order, which comes with discrimination and judgment, which is a good thing. It is good to be discriminatory and judgmental. God says in the Quran that He sent down the Furqan, the criterion, that we may judge between men. We can use this Quran as a standard to judge the quality of other people's actions, and from there, based on our judgments, which are founded in Quranic principles, choose to either associate with those people or not. We can go forward on that basis. And finally, point number 9 is, in this system, there's the exaltation of victimhood versus the exaltation of self-responsibility. I'm a product of my environment. My mom and dad abused me, therefore I'm full of all this anxiety. Oh, I'm down bad. There's no good women around, so therefore that's why I'm going to masturbate and I'm addicted to porn. Oh, I have a disease. I have illness. That's why I'm addicted to my drugs. It's all my victimhood. I'm so lonely. That's why I watch all these movies and these animes and these video games, and I have nothing else in life. I'm a victim of my society and my circumstances. I'm not going to take responsibility for my actions. And this is just like all those other things I mentioned across the board. Across the board. You look at these women, I'm not going to stay chaste. I'm not going to keep myself pure before marriage because there ain't no good niggas around. There ain't no good guys around. And you look at guys, they're like, you know what? I'm not going to work really hard. I'm not going to try to apply myself towards building a future for the future generation because there's no good women around. They're all used up. They're all this and all that. It's all my victimhood. My sin and my selfishness is a forced response because of the environment around me. Whereas in the ancient world, in many ancient cultures, all ancient cultures, there was the exaltation of self-responsibility, that really the outside world doesn't matter. What matters is me fulfilling my duty and conforming myself to the word of God, the law of God. I am responsible, my responsibility is not contingent upon the society around me. I'm going to live a righteous, God-fearing, pious life because my responsibility is fundamentally and firstly before the Lord. I'm going to see the Lord on Judgment Day, and He's going to bring all of my deeds forward, and there's no excuses I'm going to have. He has set down an undebatable, incontestable law, and I am duty-bound and beholden to keep the principles of this law. And if I contravene this law, I'm going to suffer the consequences in the hereafter. I am responsible for myself, not the world around me. You see in the Quran where it says, thou art not a custodian over them. Wouldst thou, there is no compulsion in doctrine. Wouldst thou destroy thy soul, following hard upon them in grief? The outside world is generally speaking, a matter of indifference to us. The believing man, the believing woman, we look to our Lord and we look to ourselves. We look to our responsibilities before our Lord and we fulfill those responsibilities. And that fulfillment is not contingent upon how the world is behaving at that time. So now we have, and even the shaitan, he's a master victim, we see in the Quran, where he says, oh, after he deliberately disobeyed God, God commanded all the angels to lower themselves to Adam, and he was just like, oh, I'm not going to do it because I'm made from fire and Adam is made from clay. And then God says, okay, fine, get out of here. And then he just like, oh, because you've sent me astray, because you see the victimhood, the blaming again. My sin is not my fault. It wasn't my flagrant disobeying of the word of God. It was your fault. Because you, God, have sent me astray, I'm going to lie and wait for them on the straight path and from their rights and their lefts and their fronts and their backs. And we see even in the end, in the end, he's going to say, I called and you followed, and people are going to be blaming each other on the day of judgment. The evildoers who are going to hell, they're going to blame the shaitan. He's going to say, no, 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 I called and you followed. You see as well in the Quran, there'll be those who were despised will say to those who are proud, I followed these people and they led me astray. And then the proud are going to say, no, we had no responsibility over you. It's this victimhood, this constant blaming of others for our sin and our shortcomings instead of holding ourselves responsible. And that is another foundational plank of the modern world of not holding up, not keeping oneself in check and being responsible for oneself. Systematic victimhood, systematic oppression. Oh, I don't work. I'm going to live off of this welfare. You see a lot of these African Americans do it. And I'm not attacking you if you're a good African American who works hard, but they'll be like, oh, I'm going to live off this welfare because systematic white oppression. You see it, even these white guys, they'll be like, oh, this systematic oppression of our race. And there is some truth to this, of course, but the systematic oppression of our race and the destruction of our women and all this cultural Marxism. I'm not going to work hard. I'm just going to sit at home and play video games and watch conspiracy theory documentaries and videos, and chat on Reddit and 4chan about how oppressed the white race is. And they never think to themselves, how did the white race or the black race or the brown race or whatever race get to the situation that they're in? What mistakes and sins that your people have committed in larger numbers, which has caused this destruction from internally and externally. So it's always the blaming of other people as opposed to taking responsibility for oneself. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out.
Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naeem, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, his prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God himself, which is why he has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many, many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative, holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person and Muslim in general that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their New World Order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my three biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, My people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e., mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.